It is the Fantasy Finish Line podcast. Tonight is Wednesday, November 9th, 2022. And 1 week off is apparently too many weeks off for us. But it is week 10 and we are going to talk trends.
Well, that's the fun of being live, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I didn't say, oh shit, we're starting over.
So I'm sure the whiskey...
I just gathered myself and...
The whiskey will help.
Oh, it always does.
To the fantasy finish line with us. That's the goal here. I'm not much of a marathon person myself, but I do see a little bit of marathon running, cross country running as a good metaphor if we're talking about the fantasy finish line.
The fantasy football season in general, maybe?
Because you have to make waiver picks every week, right?
Right.
You can't be like taking off this Tuesday because you had a really bad day at work. That's just going to lower your chances of getting that guy going to the playoffs just by a couple percentage points every time that happens. We've all seen those teams that have gotten lucky, especially in previous years. I remember there's a gentleman named Tom who's in one of our local leagues. Mm-hmm. All he had to do for 2 years to become like maybe the number 1 or 2 seed in the league was draft players from the New England Patriots before everyone else did.
Yeah, and he did that very efficiently, I might add.
But that strategy doesn't work forever, as we see over the past couple of years. So,
all right, can I just ask you a behind the scenes question for a moment?
Yeah.
You do have internet, right? Because I don't, and I know that's been a constant problem for my computer. There we go. It's back. There we are.
Yeah.
I see myself on the screen and everything.
I've got the internet.
It's back. I just wanted to, make sure it was me.
He likes
we can let people peek in the background. For instance, my notes say last week was an adventure, but last week we were off, and we enjoyed a bye week. I hope that you had a bit of a bye week yourself. You, the listener, not you, Dave. I know you don't have bye weeks. We had a bye week because you had too many things going on.
Right, I was out,
and I was more than happy to not.
I was out in Minneapolis, Minnesota, but it wasn't on business that had to do with the Vikings, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, one can dream.
Yeah, I've been to the stadium. The Viking stadium is pretty cool. They've got all of the newfangled tech, and then of course they have like the. You've seen the games there, right? So they have
the Viking ship.
They have the Viking ship that like fires things out of it, and like a guy with this giant bongo Viking drum thing.
I'm sure it's not actually a bongo.
Oh no!
I'm sure it's not called a bongo.
No, and the percussionist in my band would not appreciate it being called a bongo either.
No, but that's okay. He's not here on the podcast to correct us.
I called it a bongo, so I'm dreaming things into reality.
Nice
here.
Bongos.
But the story of today is something that we do 3 or 4 times a year, right? Talk about player trends.
Yes. So what you like to look at, Dave, is 3 weeks in a row, going up, going down, generally in points, but though we may pull from other significant statistics if we find them relevant.
Yeah, and you could do more than 3, but I would never suggest doing less. I just don't feel like
I agree.
That proves anything.
And in fact, many of the players that I chose for today, not on purpose, but happened to be 4, 5, or even 6 weeks in a row of a certain trend.
Well, at that point, it's a trajectory. It's it is a path that they're on. Yeah,
that's true. I think that's accurate. Certainly for the first guy here, we got Justin.
He's not going to be able to go up any further in week 10.
I don't know, man. 50 points, not as crazy as it once sounded. So way back in week 3, he had 6.9, and then every week since he's gone up 10, 17, 19, 24, 26, 42.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing fantastic. Next week, like I said, 50 points. You heard it here first. If he doesn't score 50 points, then it's like, well, of course Justin Fields didn't score 50 points. Don't be crazy. But if he scores 50 points, I can be like, see, I told you.
You live in the Chicago area. You see kind of how the pasta feels right now about the team.
Oh, the meatballs are being served up left and right. Everybody is drinking Kool-Aid to wash it down. It is super Bears like optimism right now.
Which is a lot of fun, and he's honestly...
It is, I agree. I'm not like trying to poke fun at the Bears fans for being falsely optimistic. Like, what I've seen in the last 3 weeks, the Bears have scored like 30 points a week. They're playing very well. The quarterback is playing really well, and he looks like an exciting new quarterback, not just someone who sort of lucked his way into 6 touchdowns like Mitch Trubisky did a few years ago.
Yeah, a lot of it's on his back, though, and I'm sure you're going to talk about that. But like because he's gained a lot more rushing yardage over the last couple of weeks, is directly associated with the success that they have because he's got this additional threat that wasn't really being used.
Well, they've actually lost 2 of those 3 games. So they're not like turning him into wins.
Well, they
yet.
don't want to win the games.
I think you're right. And what's great is many of the like fans who are my age who play fantasy football, they totally get that. They're like, I love that he plays good, and I love that they lost the game because let's get a better pick.
Right.
And they have the first round pick at least, but they don't have the second round pick anymore.
So they're going to need some pass rushers.
Since we last spoke on the podcast, they've acquired Chase Claypool. How do you feel about sending Chase Claypool from your Steelers here to Chicago?
Well, the Steelers are an organization that succeeds very well historically at training up wide receivers and then letting them go. Chase Claypool is someone who has been looked at even in the Steelers organization behind the scenes and beat reporters, etc., as being somewhat of a diva-esque personality that is a little bit of a distraction. Okay. And he's like a 6'4", 240-pound guy that can run and catch and jump. But his problem, which is the Bears fans are about to find out, is that Chase Claypool can't catch with his hands. He's a body catcher. And so he's a big target. He's a red zone threat. He's a down-the-field guy if he has to be. But if you guard him correctly and don't allow him to catch at his body, he will not catch out with his hands.
Yeah, I feel like that's an easier way to defend him. Because if all you have to do is keep his hands away, and if he can't get his hands out there, he's not catching the ball. Because you need your hands to catch with your body.
Right.
And, I feel like that's more, I don't know, an easier job to defend.
Well,
or you just, interfere with him and don't get the call, as what happened at the end of the game.
And I think he's a good player, and he's a young player, so he could still improve. I think it's a good acquisition by the Chicago Bears, but I think it's a better move by the Steelers because they have other guys in the box, and George Pickens already looks like a guy who's going to be better than Chase Claypool down the road, and they already have Deontay Johnson, who is according to some stat, I forget exactly what it is, the most open man so far this year in the NFL. So you talk about guys like Chase Claypool who don't get a lot of separation, but they're big and they can get contested catches. But Deontay Johnson is just always open, and so those are the guys you want, like the Adam Thielen and the Antonio Browns, who if you look at them and you know where they're going to be, then you're good. They also have the Steelers do, without getting too big into Steelers, Calvin Austin, who was on IR. He's not going to play this year.
Okay.
But he ran like a 4.33 or something ridiculous.
Oh, wow.
So he's one of those long field fast guys. So I think it was a good acquisition by the Bears, but I think they still need a true number one receiver. That's not Darnell Mooney, and that's not Pettis, and it's not Equanimous St. Brown, and it's not Chase Claypool.
That's true.
Yep.
They still need to draft someone.
They got a big WR room full of guys that are decent 2 or 3s.
Yeah, maybe they can pick up somebody in a free agency next year, or Brandon Cooks.
Well, they have like $100+ million to spend, so
right. They'll have a lot of money.
They can get somebody.
So back to the Bears. Josh Fields. I keep calling him Josh Fields, and for once, like, hey, Josh, Allen, Justin Fields, whatever. At least at least Justin Fields really showed that he could maybe be in that conversation. But he isn't.
Fields.
He's not slinging the ball around. Yeah, I could just stick with that. He's topped out at 17 completions over the last 2 weeks, and that's his high water mark for the season.
Right.
What he's doing is he's playing smart. This is what I really like to want to dug into his stats. He has 2 interceptions in the last 6 weeks, 1.4% interception rate. Now, like until this year and maybe last year, the best quarterback in the league when it came to not throwing interceptions was Aaron Rodgers. And he would usually lead the league every year in interception rate, which you want to be very low, and he would be between like 1 and 1.5%. So if he is throwing at a 1.4% interception rate, that means that he's doing a really good job at protecting the ball and throwing the ball, to the right places. And that's over 6 games. That's not a small sample size. That's 2/3 of the season so far. That's the kind of rate that you like to see, but we want to see if he can keep that up for the whole season. So, in addition to the improvement in the passing game, it's improved. It's not great yet. It's not even very good, I would say, as far as numbers go. He's only had 208 passing yards as his highest number all year. He's running the ball more. So, he was running the ball 8.5 times per game, but now over the last 4 games, he's running the ball 12 times per game. He's sort of being freed up to be more creative, to do what he wants in the offense. Instead of having to force everything that he's being told to do, he is seeing what's in front of him and taking what's there, which I think every quarterback needs to be empowered to do. Otherwise, they can't do their job properly. No coach can script exactly what the defense is going to be doing.
Maybe Belichick, but
maybe Belichick. That's fine. I'll grant you that one.
Mostly not.
Yeah. Mostly no one else is going to be doing that. Sure. The greatest coach ever probably can do this thing.
The gray hoodie can determine, you know.
You need to cut off your own sleeves, and that's something that he does. So anyways.
But yeah, avoiding the interceptions, playing it safe with the pass.
He's protecting the ball, and it's great. And because he's protecting the ball, and because he's helping the offense produce points, I don't see why the coaching staff would reel him in. So I think he'll be allowed to continue what he's doing. The Bears are running the ball less, even if it's just a little less, and this is something we talked about a couple weeks ago, with maybe a month ago or more now, the run-pass split between teams. The Bears are running the ball more than any team in the league, and it wasn't even close. And they've sort of come back to like the extreme end of the league, but they've definitely come back a bit. And I think what helps is that teams are saying, okay, he's going to throw the ball a little bit more. We have to pay attention to that a little bit more. He's going to be the one running instead of just handing it off. So you can't necessarily stack the box against a quarterback who's just going to scramble because he'll just go to whatever side you're not stacking. So they have to reconsider how they're defending him, and that's what matters the most. As long as you're keeping defenses on their toes, you're going to find more places for your offense to succeed. He's trending up, and he's got a great shot at staying hot. He has very favorable matchups in the next 2 weeks. They play Detroit, who are 28th in fantasy points, and Atlanta, who are 30th in fantasy points given up to quarterbacks. So, you know, if you're giving up the 32nd most, you're giving up the most. So this is where that scale lies. So very impressive stuff by Justin Fields over the last couple of weeks. I will endeavor to get his name right because he deserves it at this point.
Mr. Fields.
Yes. Justin Fields. Cheers.
Making delicious cookies out there in malls nearby you.
Oh, hell yeah. I appreciate that.
So we're drinking Lagunitas Maximus Colossal IPA, 9% ABV ale. And I'm just getting into it now. The previous beers I had were a PBR and a Coors Light, which means that this is a massive step.
That is a PBR and a Coors Light in one.
A massive step in the
right direction.
In the right direction, depending on your perspective.
Yeah. You're right. Perspective is all a matter of which direction you're facing.
But yeah, so we have a lot of people to get through. Justin Fields certainly has been trending up, as you mentioned, not only over 3, but many more than that, games that is. And you could see over the past couple of weeks, the percentage rostered in leagues has gone up tremendously. And the amount of money in FAAB that people were putting out to try and obtain him was going up pretty it
was very
what's
steep.
The word, precipitously.
Yeah, it wasn't exponential, strictly speaking, but we did have someone spend all but $3 of their budget on Justin Fields this week in the Drink5 League.
Which is funny. It feels like they should have just spent all of it, although I don't know what other people were at. Maybe it was a strategic move. Maybe he was the highest in...
No, he wasn't. Well, he bid 61, and there's a big Bears fan in the league who bid 60, but that Bears fan has Patrick Mahomes on his team. Probably wasn't going to be betting on Justin Fields.
If you have the Mahomes, you don't need the Fields. Got it.
So maybe he was just like, I need to keep a couple dollars around for later.
But it's my understanding that Mahomes doesn't have any kind of good bakery skills or any good cookie recipes.
You know, Mahomes' culinary reputation is questionable from what I know.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Geno Smith. Week 7 versus the Chargers, 14 points. Then the Giants, 19 points, and Arizona, 21 points. He was originally drafted in the second round of the 2013 NFL rookie draft, and he's been on 4 different NFL teams, starting with the Jets throughout his career. But he's never played more than 5 games in a season until this year, after his first 2 years as a starter for the Jets, which didn't work out very well for him, mostly because he was throwing as many or more interceptions than touchdowns each year he played.
Good.
Since taking on the starting mantle as a Seahawk, though, after Russell Wilson's departure, Geno Smith has surprised a lot.
He's at least a B-Hawk, if not an A-Hawk at this point.
He's an A-Hawk. Well, I don't know what that means.
Well, you were like, he's a C-Hawk.
Oh, this is a joke.
C minus, I don't know.
It's very good.
But he's very good this year.
A D-Hawk. I'm going to have to sleep on this. Yeah. But he's surprised a lot of people. Over the last 3 weeks, he's put together a streak of at least 210 passing yards and 2 touchdowns in each game he's played. In fact, last week was the 7th time in 9 games that he's put up multiple scores, and he's also rushed for 38 yards in that last contest. He started to rush a little bit more. That was actually when they were playing the Cardinals, and for a quarter, maybe a quarter and a half, he looked more Kyler Murray than Kyler Murray did, which was kind of fun.
Was he playing COD on the sideline? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, it's all about the video games with Kyler, yeah. But no, what I'm telling you is it's not the Geno Smith we saw coming out of college on the Jets, who struggled as a starter and never really found himself.
I agree.
And you don't often see a quarterback that has success later in his career by this much, that is stuck around as a backup and then suddenly, sticks his head up above water again to become in the conversation for a top 10 quarterback over the course of a year. Mm-hmm. I can't think of anybody personally who has made that particular journey.
Who's made this? I think it's happened once or twice, but I cannot think of a name.
Sure.
Ryan Fitzpatrick comes to mind. Although Ryan Fitzpatrick had a lot more success early in his career.
You have like a Kurt Warner who went to a different league and came back and things like that.
Yeah, but once he started playing for the Rams, that was like their Super Bowl year, but he came in because someone was injured. He wasn't given a starting job like Geno was. Like Geno is a journeyman sort of quarterback who they said, okay, well, I guess this is a rebuilding year. We'll just throw Geno Smith in there and see what happens.
But he's been playing so well that he's playing himself into a role as perhaps even a franchise quarterback if they are able to continue on the trajectory that they're currently on. Now, they have a lot of weapons. They have Kenneth Walker, who's been a bit of a revelation in fantasy circles after Rashad Penny went down and Walker was finally healthy enough to play. He started scoring 20 points per game kind of averages, which are RB1 averages. Mm-hmm. And he may end up, a lot of fantasy pundits say, as a top 5 or 6 running back at the end of the year. I completely agree that offense has always been a run-first offense. And so if that's the guy who's going to do it, then he puts himself in a position to be a top 10 running back. It's hard for me to say top 5 when you have guys like Joe Mixon and Christian McCaffrey and Austin Eckler out there.
Yeah.
But he's playing that way right now.
Yeah.
And so DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, the guys that are on this squad that are weapons for Geno are fantastic. And he's starting to use them in a way that we almost thought that they would be lost this year.
It's probably one of the most talented teams he's ever played on.
Mm-hmm.
And Geno, he's doing a lot this year that is better than he's ever done in his career.
So he's currently the QB8 overall, and that's for total fantasy points for quarterbacks. He started off, admittedly, a little bit slow and has trended very well over the last several games. I have him rated going into Week 10 as number 6. That's above Tom Brady, Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, and Justin Herbert. All guys that you would never think would be rated below
Geno
Smith, especially not at the beginning of the year.
I concur.
So that's all I have to say. I like him as a top 10 quarterback for the rest of the year. In fact, in a guillotine league that I'm in, I had Tom Brady and Geno Smith, and I struggled with which one I was going to drop. I dropped Tom Brady.
Good move. I think that's the right move. What I like about Smith, what I was saying, he's doing things this year that he's never done in his career. He's leading the league in completion percentage, 73.1%. We were just talking about Justin Fields, and I was, talking about how great his interception percentage has been over the last 6 games. Geno Smith is 1.4% over the entire season. He has 15 touchdowns this year, more than he's had in any season so far in his career. His adjusted net yards per attempt, which is like how efficient are you? How many yards are you gaining per pass attempt on average when you take everything into consideration and you take into touchdowns and everything like that. 7.09, which is more of a rating than a yardage, but that is way more than he's ever had in his career. That is getting up there with where the elite quarterbacks generally are in their career. So Geno Smith is playing out of his mind this year, putting up easily the best year of his career so far. It's
a
really
career
cool to
year.
watch. Yeah, it's really cool to watch. Good for him. And the Seahawks are definitely one of the teams that will probably make the playoffs who didn't make it last year. There's always like at least a handful of teams in the league that seem to do that, which is one of the reasons why the parity in the league is fun, even if it is parity that is sort of in the middle of the league rather than teams moving from the bottom to the top.
Yeah, and so I like both those quarterbacks, but I think you'll agree with me when I say that although Justin Fields has certainly broken out over the past couple games, specifically last week, the person who has the odds of being the most consistently good quarterback throughout the rest of the season is still very much Geno and not Justin.
But who would you want if you had to bet on fantasy points for the rest of the year? Who would you want?
Geno Smith. He has way better receivers. I mean,
that's true.
It's all about the receivers.
That's really true.
Like you can have great games as Justin Fields, but ultimately you're gonna have Darnell Mooney and Austin Pettis. Like it's just,
Chase Claypool.
Yes, but at some point, like those guys there's no ceiling there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's true.
But
or it's a low enough ceiling that you're gonna hit your head. It's the 13.5 floor.
But this is the part of the season, a little over halfway through, where people have to do things like decide what quarterbacks that they're going to try to have on their team for the best matchups for the playoffs.
I've got some notes on good matchups for the playoffs later on for other, not quarterbacks, for other players though.
Good. Well,
I think it's important to think about that.
Let's move on and get a couple more guys because I know we could discuss. That's
we could discuss two guys. We try to cut down and like have a reasonable length podcast every week. We could talk about one or two guys the whole show.
Yeah, because
if we just let ourselves go.
Because the discussion isn't really about the guy.
Well, we talked about Chase Claypool for 5 minutes during Justin Fields.
It's case in point. It's mostly about the things happening around the guy.
Yeah.
So like you need a talented
That's what's
player.
great about the NFL.
Everyone's talented in the NFL. If you're in the right position with the right people around you and you're pushed in the right way, then
you can produce.
It can produce magic. Yeah.
All right. So another talented guy is Gabe Davis. In Week 6 at Kansas City, he put up 15 points. Week 8 versus Green Bay, only 4.5. Week 9 at the Jets, only 4.3. So he was a preseason sleeper pick. He went off with an ADP of WR 25, and it seemed like a steal to the people who were taking him in my leagues anyways. But he is now the WR 33 on the season. Unfortunately, he hasn't followed up that amazing playoff performance with a good season. He had almost a 50-point game that last game in the playoffs last year. He's only averaging 2.5 receptions per game this year. It's a feast or famine mode. He has a 30-point game from Week 5, which was 3 receptions for 171 yards and 2 touchdowns, which is an impossible pace to keep up. 57 yards per catch is what he had in that game. So that's an even better point per touch average than Joe Mixon. I wrote in my column this week that Joe Mixon averaged over 2 points per touch this week, which is absolutely crazy for a running back who's going to get the ball 26 times.
It's one of those things, as everyone knows who's listening to this podcast or watching us on YouTube, when you have a performance by a guy like Joe Mixon that scored somewhere between 45 and 60 points, probably depending on the scoring rules in your league, when you can beat a team that has a guy like that on it, then you feel like you've really accomplished
Super
something.
satisfying.
So we play in a lot of leagues, and I had one league where I didn't think it was going to happen, but I had Justin Fields, who in that league gets bonuses for things like long touchdowns, and he scored.
So the 61-yard touchdown that he ran for.
Yeah, so he scored like 55 points, and I was like, okay.
Did you cancel out Joe Mixon on the other side?
Yeah, an eye for an eye, man.
That's nice. Well done.
So Gabe Davis.
He's not going to get 10 points per touch every game.
Right.
So he hasn't exceeded 7 targets in a single game this year. That happened once. Now, the 7 targets, that is. So Josh Allen was up in the air. It seems like today the news is that he will try to play. So if he's going to play, his stock isn't going to drop quite as much as it would have if Case Keenum was going to be the starter for the Bills. So that's a situation to keep an eye on. but I don't anticipate Davis being worth starting over the next couple of games because he has really tough matchups. So, or I'm sorry, the tough matchups come later. He has really favorable matchups over the next 3 weeks, including the game on Thanksgiving, which is an early game. So if he winds up putting up a big game in an island situation where everyone's going to see him, trade him to someone who's gullible in your league because after that he plays a whole bunch of teams that are really tough, and like he's a feast or famine player as it is. So if he's going to have to play against the teams that have really good coverage, then he's screwed.
Well, the way that the Buffalo Bills win games right now is all through Josh Allen, right? So it's through his talents, his throwing prowess, his ability to scramble and run, and some of those players like Gabriel Davis. When did it become Gabe, by the way? Because it was Gabriel for a while. So he just decided one day
on Flea Flicker, it's just Gabe
Davis.
Davis.
Like, call me Gabe. Starts today. Starts today.
Guess so. It's like Travis Etienne. He's just like I guess. When I'm here, people call me this, and when I'm there, people call me that.
Yeah. Well, so I think it's so much about Josh Allen and about him specifically that you're absolutely right. If Allen has something that's limiting his elbow, then that's going to be a problem for any of these deep pass catchers like Davis. And I think that Gabriel Davis is similar to like a Mike Williams from a couple of years ago, when he was only getting a couple of really good games per season, and the rest of them he would just be quiet. Everyone would drop him, and then he would score 35 points. So it's boom or bust at its finest, right? And my point here is that I think you're correct, in that
I'm right,
and that you should try to sell him if your league's trade window is still available over the next couple of weeks, because I do think he'll have another big game.
So the Thanksgiving game is week 12,
and then after that, we'll probably Buffalo will be going through some tough matchups. Like you said.
Minnesota, Cleveland, and Detroit over the next 3 weeks. All those teams giving up top 10 fantasy points to opposing wide receivers.
Yeah,
definitely a chance for him to have a good game. After one more good game, try and sell him. That's just my advice, because after that, New England, the Jets, Miami, Chicago, Cincinnati, none of those teams are giving up like lots of points to opposing wide receivers.
But it's not.
They're middle of the pack or they're in top 10.
It's not just about that. It's about the fact that the thing that wins championships is consistency, not occasional good games.
True.
And so those boomer bust guys, great in the regular season to triumph over someone that you might not otherwise. But you don't want to be playing someone who's only good once every 3 games when you have to win the game to survive.
That's true.
But I do think, from what I've read on Twitter and all the things about Josh Allen's health with his elbow, he's going to try to play through it. But I think it's likely that if they're going to rest him at all, it's this week, right? It would make sense. And if they do, then that's
really against Minnesota.
That's Case Keenum, right?
It would be
Case Keenum. Minnesota knows well, obviously.
Oh, or Case Keenum knows Minnesota well, perhaps.
So interesting, but I think
a
good analysis on Gabriel Davis. Not a guy that you want to see speeding down the field with Josh Allen back behind center.
That's true. I mean, he's just not going to throw it to him that often, and that's part of the problem.
Yeah. So Jerry Jeudy is the next person I have on my list. Obviously, Broncos wide receiver that has been pretty highly lauded. Week 6 at the Chargers, 6.9 points, 7 versus the Jets, 13.1, and Week 8 at Jacksonville, 15.3. Now, if you look at his history of the game log over the course of the year, he's been very inconsistent at best. But a lot of that is not all about Jerry Jeudy. It's about the uninspired offensive play calling and the head coaching issues that we've seen happening almost every game. It's about an out-of-his-element Russell Wilson who's been playing in shotgun, not allowed to do the kinds of things that he's used to over his years in Seattle. It's about early injuries to the running back room that have changed the way and the players that the Broncos have had in their organization so far this year.
Yeah.
And over the past few weeks, Judy has proven to be the receiver to roster in Denver. He has led or tied for the most receiving targets over the past 2 games. And he's actually tied in those past 2 games for the WR14 overall with Mike Evans along that same timeline, those 2 games. So if you look at who the Broncos are going to play in Week 10, it's the Tennessee Titans. They have the distinction of giving up the 3rd most points to wide receivers. And if you have Judy on your roster, the question that I would ask is just, what better time is there possibly to play him than right now? If you have him on your roster and you're sitting him, then why do you have him on your roster? So I think that Judy will continue to do a little better in general than most of the other pass catchers on that team. Cortland Sutton was doing well for a while there, but it feels to me like that was happening because him and Wilson and the play calling were not on the same page.
You mean Judy and Wilson? Or Cortland Sutton and Wilson?
I said Cortland was doing better for a little while, but I think that was happening because Judy and Wilson were not on the same page. Yes. So I think Judy should be, at least hypothetically, the number 1 guy on that team. It looks like that's the way that things have been rolling out over the past couple of weeks. And I'm not saying that the Denver Broncos are going to suddenly, shock the world. But over the past couple games, because we've been forced to see so many Broncos matches on national television, they've actually looked a little bit better, and they haven't won only through field goals. So I'm hoping that that what we saw from Judy can continue to keep up, and I am willing to, especially since I've been so good so far this year on Fantasy Pros. As an expert picking wide receivers, I do have Judy fairly high up in the rankings this week, and I think that he'll continue to do well over the next few.
Yeah, I like, unlike Gabe Davis, Jerry Judy hasn't dipped below 7 targets over the last 4 weeks. So I think
also a good sign.
That's a very good sign. Yeah, big fan of all that. So
big fan of players.
Big fan
producing.
of players who get the ball and do something with it, and are on my team as well.
That's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. We just needed a little drink, a little moment.
I really want to put the players up, at least the pictures of the players, while we're talking about them. But I'm just a little worried because we don't own any of those copyrights.
We don't own any of it. We own this. You own this music.
Yeah.
And we own this broadcast.
I own this house and this music, and we made a logo. So we're good there.
Yeah.
You have a Star Wars mouse pad. I'm not so sure about that.
We're not showing it on the screen. In fact, just mentioning it, like you can't see it on the screen. It's completely blocked by my computer. I feel way better about showing all the other logos on my laptop than I do about showing this.
Yeah, the Lucas bot is going to come out.
Yeah, so it's not actually there. Dave is just making this up. Please leave us alone, George Lucas and Mickey Mouse.
It's just a black mouse pad.
It's just generic.
It's not Darth
You're
Vader.
just extrapolating. But one other thing that you do own, Dave, is the 8th spot overall in the Fantasy Pros expert rankings.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. Right? It's we've gone over 9 weeks so far, and each week I think I've gotten a little bit better and climbed up the rankings. I was at like 30 to 25 to 20, got into the top 10, and now at number 8. And so what that means on fantasypros.com, they have an aggregate ranking of various experts throughout different websites or publications that cover the fantasy football industry. And all of those people, 200 plus, get together on this website and provide their rankings on a weekly basis for all of the skill positions, plus flex, super flex, defense, and kickers. Not everyone does every position, but most of us do most of them. Yeah,
in the top 10, everyone except for a few of them will, some people will skip kicker and defense.
Mm-hmm. So I'm happy to say it's probably the highest that I've ever been in a non-Jean Lajoie way. In the
You're not eating ketchup chips to get there?
In the seasonal rankings for Fantasy Pros experts. And what that means for those of you following Drink 5 is that you can see my actual rankings on the website under Dave Biggs rankings each week. And on Fantasy Pros, you have to pick more than one. So even if you have a subscription to one of their packages, you have to pick one. You have to pick 2, 3, 4 experts. But on our site, for free, regardless of whether or not you pay Fantasy Pros anything, you can see my rankings in all of their number 8 overall glory.
Yes. Yes. Number 3 in wide receivers, I believe I saw.
But I wouldn't necessarily take my...
Number 3 for wide receivers.
My quarterback
Number
advice.
13 for running backs. Number 26 for kickers. Take your kicker advice. Right. Maybe don't take the quarterback advice. But hey, if we can isolate those sort of things, then the advice is just that much better.
You know, I like the accuracy rankings they have there. There's a whole page about exactly how they do it, the algorithm.
Yes, I remember reading through it years ago. It's probably been tweaked.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, I don't know if because I haven't done my own analysis on that. I'm not sure if I'm like not succeeding in like the top 15 or the bottom 15. Like if I'm not ranking the quarterbacks from 15 to 32 very, very well, that doesn't matter very much.
That's true. I think they certainly weight the better ones more.
Yeah.
Fair. So back to our trends. We got a few more here. Aaron Jones is running back for the Packers in Week 7 in Washington, 24 points. Week 8 against Buffalo, 17.7. This last week in Detroit, that's 3 road games. You know, can be tough. 5.5
being
points
on the Packers in 2022 could be tough.
That's just very tough. So what Aaron Jones has is a couple of peaks this season. He has one early. He's another one in Week 7, as I mentioned, 24 points that week. He's currently sliding back down the other side of that second peak, which is a fun place to ski, but not necessarily a good place to be if you're a fantasy running back. So, like his team this year, he's very inconsistent. He has touchdowns in only 2 games this year, though he's got 5 of them in those 2 games. So it's feast or famine for him, too. He's become the victim of game scripts that are kind of working against him during the losing streak. He has 9 or fewer carries in 3 of the last 4 games, and he's on a downward trend with A.J. Dillon nipping at his heels. Dillon has just 9 fewer carries than Jones over the entire season. And if Jones wasn't as involved as he was in the passing game, he would definitely be out of the discussion, even for every week starters at running back. So as it stands right now, I get it. It's hard to give up on Aaron Jones. You drafted him as the 13th overall running back. You, the royal you. I don't know if you actually have him on any of your teams, Dave. So you didn't draft him to provide depth to your team. You drafted him to be a damn starter. He's also on a team of underperformers, so he's not a good sell option right now. The next 3 weeks, the Packers play teams who are in the top 10 of fewest fantasy points given up to opposing running backs. So it's not going to get any better right now. He only has 1 matchup against a team outside of the top 14 in that category through Week 17. So he has nothing but shitty matchups for the rest of the season. It may be the time to sell Jones. Even though you're not selling him at his high point, he has a much better chance of going lower in value than he does of bouncing back, like we talked about with maybe a Gabe Davis, where he might bounce back a little bit and you could try and sell him a little bit higher. I think if you feel the need to sell on Aaron Jones, then you have to do it right now, even though you are not going to, you're not going to get as much value as you might want for him. So it's going to take a good salesman to get a lot of value for him right now. You may be able to get something. I think that what you really need to target is somewhere. If you want to trade him, you need to target a need. Don't worry so much about like 1-for-1 value. You have to target a need and fill a hole on your team, because Aaron Jones is going to leave a hole at your running back position without enough points, and that is going to hurt more than keeping him on your than holding on to him and trying to figure out what the hell to do. So I don't like Aaron Jones for the rest of the year. I don't like what the Packers have shown this year. I feel like it's very I don't know. It's one of those teams that could turn around at any minute because they have Aaron Rodgers, but at the same time, like, it feels like the vibe in Green Bay is pretty bad, and therefore I don't want to have much fantasy stock in that team.
Well, you know how the NFL works. It's not like the MLB or even the NBA. There's not enough games for teams to go through like 3 different whole cycles of up and down.
That's a good point. Yeah,
If
very true.
you're playing in 17 games, it's a lot different from playing in 82 or
160.
160. So in these cases, you have the ability to trend up and then back down again and then back up. That doesn't happen as often in the NFL. And I think that what we're seeing, obviously, with the Packers has the most to do with Rodgers not being able to find a wide receiver that he can consistently connect with, which is frustrating him, and then that's not helping the organization. But not only that, they're losing all these different players. And for example, I'm going to talk about a gentleman right now who is on the Green Bay Packers defense that was just lost to a torn ACL. And it's a good segue to talk about our next player trend, who's Tony Pollard. Of course, the running back for the Dallas Cowboys, who has been around for about as long as Ezekiel Elliott, if not the same amount of time, but is always looked at as the guy behind Elliott. Week 6 at Philadelphia, 6.2 points. Week 7 versus Detroit, 11.9. I think they're the same age. And Week 8 versus Chicago, 33.2.
You know that I'm furiously looking that up, so just keep going. I'll let you know.
Furiously, like a kung fu panda. So 33.2 points last week versus Chicago is kind of what people really wanted to see, was Pollard without Elliott, because we know last year and other times when Elliott was unhealthy or not able to finish the game, Pollard looked like a just as good or a better version of Ezekiel Elliott.
I mean, a version of him, I don't know about that. I would just say, like, he doesn't have the same running style. He looks better as a running back, frankly.
What I mean is of that position for that team.
Sure.
So in the short term, the success of Tony Pollard really depends on the health of Ezekiel Elliott. And with Elliott out when the Cowboys went up against the Bears, Pollard had 14 carries for 131 yards and 3 touchdowns. And this is the holy grail of fill-in running back experiences.
That's pretty good.
The problem is that Tony Pollard is not really available on waiver wires in leagues that are filled with smart fantasy players, because Tony Pollard, Alexander Madison, and a couple other guys are really the players that are rostered, that are the backups that also produce.
Tony Pollard actually was in on more snaps the week before that against Detroit. He played on 65% of snaps. Against Chicago, it was only 53% of snaps, although that may be because it was a bit of a blowout.
Yeah, and looking at that, the matchup against Green Bay this week is a good one, with a major injury, like I just mentioned, is a torn ACL occurring to the linebacker Rashawn Gary, who leads the team in not only pressures and sacks, but also quarterback hits and tackles for loss. Mm-hmm. So if we're looking at a high score list for the Green Bay Packers, here's this guy who is no longer at the arcade. It's too bad. As much as Jerry Jones continues to say that Pollard will keep taking a back seat to Elliott, and believe me, every single time he gets the opportunity to do so, he downplays Pollard. And I don't understand it, except to know that Jerry Jones likes the guys that are in lights, and he likes to be in lights, and he likes the superstars. And Tony Pollard has just never really been a superstar.
That's very true.
He's been the backup. If maybe Tony Pollard was surrounded by like dancing Las Vegas showgirls, then he would look at Tony Pollard slightly differently.
Jerry Jones would. I mean, everyone would, I suppose.
Yes, they would. Also, there'd be too many men and women on field.
People would be, looking a lot more at him. So, Tony Pollard, 2 years younger than Ezekiel Elliott, 3 fewer years in the league. So, he's really coming into his prime right now.
Too many showgirls on field.
That's not quite a penalty.
In Dynasty, there are questions then about like who's going to be with the team going forward, because I believe they're both set to not to be unrestricted free agents the following year. So it's like who are they going to sign and continue with the team? But we're not talking necessarily about Dynasty right now. Maybe you can get back to that in a moment. I can't see a world in which Pollard goes back to being a backup over the last year and a half of continued success at the position that he plays. And Elliott did practice today, by the way, Wednesday, and we're expecting him to play against the Packers this week, looking at that practice and his health. But he is on a snap count in practice, and looking strictly at the numbers, look at Pollard. He's led the league in yards after contact per carry. Led the league this year, while Elliott is 47th. 47th in yards after contact per carry.
Yeah, and that's what you would expect. The opposite. You would expect Elliott, the bruising running back, to be the one who would be able to be up at the top of the league in that.
So I do like Pollard this week. I expect for Elliott to suck up just enough touches going forward to keep Pollard at a flex level of play. Maybe RB3, RB2, like a low end RB2. But he should be an RB1 or 2 based on his pure talent and skill and chemistry with the team. And Jerry Jones and the organization is just simply fixated at this point with Elliott being the guy instead of Pollard, and it's frustrating, and
it may be like a contract thing too.
Well, it doesn't really matter. It's like you play the guy that makes you win the Super Bowl.
I agree. Like, that's how you should run the team. So Ezekiel Elliott is under contract through 2026. I didn't remember until I looked this up. He signed a 6-year, $90 million extension in September of 2019.
There's an out next year.
There's always outs. Always outs. Tony Pollard will be an unrestricted free agent next year.
So this is what, and I had talked about this on a previous show, I'm pretty sure. But basically, I think next year they either have to cut ties with Zeke with an out and allow for Pollard to try to be the guy, or Pollard's going to end up being the RB1 or RB1-2 on a different team.
Yeah. Pollard's going to get paid next year, no matter where he winds up.
He's done so well; he's going to get some money. Yeah.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Zeke Elliott's going to be owed $11 million next year if he plays for the Cowboys.
Yeah.
It doesn't renegotiate.
Well, let's talk about a couple more guys before we sign off here.
Absolutely. So, will you share that with me?
Oh, yeah.
I would just like a little bit, maybe.
Happy to help.
Maybe a little more than a little bit. Travis Etienne, who we had a lot of fun trying to figure out how we're supposed to pronounce his name. He can pronounce his name any way he wants, I suppose. It's his name. He's from New Orleans, so apparently back at home it's Etienne, like with an H almost.
Are you sneezing?
Thank you. Excuse me.
Is he Cajun?
He would probably be Creole, not Cajun. That's
I don't
a discussion that I don't want to wade into.
I'm not sure I even know what those mean.
Don't want to wade into that. I'll explain it to you after. So
I thought those were kinds of ways to eat shrimp. I don't know.
They are probably two different ways to eat shrimp. That's one definition. That's not the definition that everyone uses. Anyways, in week 7 against the Giants, he scored 18.4 points. Week 8 against Denver, 23.7. In week 9 against Las Vegas, 25.6 points. It's been a great couple weeks for Travis Etienne. He's feasting on home cooking because they've been at home all three of those games.
Is it shrimp?
Let's hope that's. Oh, I mean, they're in Jacksonville. You could probably get good shrimp in Jacksonville.
I've been in Jacksonville. I had shrimp in Jacksonville, actually.
Oh, was it good?
Yep.
Great. Well, then let's just pretend like that's what he's eating.
It tasted like Eastern Florida,
Which is most of Florida, let's be honest. Most of Florida is Eastern Florida.
I guess it can't really be much else.
Right. There's Central Florida, but nobody wants to be there. It's just hot and hicky.
Oh no!
Oh, we're just stepping into all kinds of trouble.
Just murdering this podcast tonight. Yeah,
it's a good idea to drink while we do podcasts.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
So hopefully the home cooking isn't the key to Etienne's success, because the Jaguars only have 2 more home games through week 17. What does appear to be the key to his success is that he's been given the keys. See what I did there? To the backfield. James Robinson, when James Robinson was on the team, Etienne had 68 carries in 7 games. Robinson was traded to the Jets 2 weeks ago. A little more than 2 weeks ago now. Etienne has 52 carries in those 2 games. He has 100 yards in each of the last 3 games, which is second in yardage, only to Derrick Henry over that span. Derrick Henry has like 5 games of 100 yards or more now in a row. He's putting together a pretty good streak there.
Yeah, because he's the only person on Tennessee that matters.
Correct. Correct.
What an organization. It's called the Tennessee Derrick Henrys at this point, I'm pretty sure.
And it's worth the price of admission because that man is awesome.
It's not bad.
Yeah. So anyways, if the upward trend for Etienne is any indication of what's to come, it's exactly why they drafted him in the first round last year. And if you think about it, really, this is Etienne's rookie year because he didn't play even in the preseason last year. So this is his first year playing NFL football.
He was out right away, and there was always a lot of hype surrounding Etienne, and I'm glad that he's in there and doing what he was supposed to do. Again, talking about dynasty leagues, I know a couple people that had drafted him and then were unable to even use the player in the regular season, which must be very frustrating.
Oh yeah, right to the IR.
But when they traded
straight to jail,
when they traded Robinson to the Jets, it's like there he is. It's him all year.
24 carries, 28 carries, just boom. They're going to use him a lot.
Yep.
So it's going to be very hard to sit him, even though he doesn't have very good matchups coming up lately. And really, he's becoming an RB10, so you're not going to want to sit him anyways. He's having a massive share of carries. But what's great is that he has a cupcake matchup for the championship game. In Week 17, he plays the Houston Texans, who are giving up the most points to opposing running backs. They're giving up an average of 30 points to opposing running backs. Not 30 points per player, but to the whole team, which is an absurd amount of points.
So it's not like they can't defend against running backs. They're just
choose
deciding not to.
I think so. I think that must be the case. So if Etienne does stumble in the next week or two, I suggest trying to buy him from someone else because you want to set up that great matchup in championship week. So we're talking a lot about looking forward right now as far as like what player matchups are going down the line in the playoffs, in the championship game. Etienne has one of the best matchups that you're going to get. He's a powerful running back. He's a guy who's getting a lot of carries and a guy who has the best matchup for Week 17.
Got to be very confident to buy the championship matchup guy.
I mean, why wouldn't you?
No, I'm kidding. I mean, he's playing well anyway. But like, it's not like in Week 12 you're going to be like, okay, well, better sell all my guys to buy only the guys that have the best matchups.
Well, I'm not saying mortgage your team, but I'm saying like, if you're going to target a running back, look for Etienne. See what that player needs. See if you're a trading partner for them.
I think that's the kind of thing that's very important that a lot of people never do. Especially as we can see the statistics of things, having a fantasy football website, podcast, YouTube channel, subscribe. We appreciate it.
Smash that like button.
To actually see the amount of traffic that occurs on fantasy sites throughout the year. You've got the big funnel at the beginning, right? Everybody wants all the information they can for the draft.
Right.
And then through weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, I think people kind of settle on a site or on an expert that they want to pay attention to, ask questions to.
Okay. I pay attention to you.
Well, except for quarterbacks, you're good.
Right. You ranked Justin Fields last, and I don't know why.
I didn't.
I'm kidding.
See, I wish Fantasy Pros would send me a thing and they'd be like, okay, well, here's what
you need to improve on is
here's what you really screwed up on this week.
I bet we could kind of like do a little post-mortem.
Oh no, not today.
No, not now for sure, but
all right. Well, you could see like this week you ranked 85 in running backs and as opposed to your usual high ranking. So we say it's probably these 2 or 3 guys that you had really low, right? That kind of thing.
Well, let's see how you did in a week.
No. We don't have enough time today for this.
Okay, that's fine.
But if we want to schedule one of our remaining shows to talk about rankings, happy to do that. So, my whole point anyway was that there's less and less people every week because there's less and less people that are involved in the fantasy leagues themselves as people play themselves out. If they have 8 losses in most 10-team and above leagues, they have no chance of making the playoffs.
Correct.
And so they no longer care about setting their lineups every week.
They're certainly not. Even if they set their lineups, they're not going to do the research that they did earlier in the year.
Not as much. Like, right, they're just going to set the lineup so people don't yell at them.
So they're allowed back the next year.
Yeah.
Because really what you want to do is make sure you make it to the draft party every year.
Yeah, that's the important part. And so when you have less and less people, the people that are paying attention are the people that you have to be worried about. And if you're not that person who's paying attention every week, then you're not going to get the kind of analysis and special information that podcasts like ours or websites, there's a ton of them out there, can offer, like those matchups for the playoffs. Anyway, my last guy that I have to talk about is Adam Thielen. And Adam Thielen, of course, Minnesota Viking wide receiver, long time. Week 6 at Miami with 13.6 points. Week 7 Arizona 9.7, and Week 9 at Washington with 8.2. So trending down over the last 3 weeks. Granted, there was a bye week there in Week 8, but we're not taking those into consideration when we talk about the trends. Thielen is averaging less catches per game, 4.8 catches, than he was last year. His yardage, 52.3 yards, has also fallen year over year. But it's the touchdown numbers that are really wrecking the sustained fantasy value going forward. Now, over the last few years, Thielen's over the last few years, Thielen has been scoring touchdowns like nobody's business. In fact, and I don't have this exact number in front of me, but I believe it's something like 1 out of 8 touches or something last year was a touchdown for Adam Thielen.
It was better than that.
What was it?
So he had 10 touchdowns on 67 receptions. So every 6.7 times he touched the ball, he scored a touchdown.
Not happening this year. So only 2 touchdowns so far in 2022, and it doesn't seem like that kind of a relationship exists any longer.
Yeah. 2 touchdowns on 38 receptions, which means every 19 touches rather than every 6.7.
Right. So those 2 touchdowns so far have hobbled his value in fantasy just as much as the minor knee injury that he is currently nursing. And the question is, how minor is a knee injury to a 32-year-old receiver? And the answer is, it's not usually minor.
Most knee injuries aren't minor to any 32-year-old.
Well, they say he has a bruised knee. But what that means to me is that you have an aging receiver in Adam Thielen that is fantastic. Do not get me wrong. But the playmakers they have on that team are fantastic when you look at Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson. They just acquired T.J. Hawkinson, who was an all-star at the University of Iowa. He was an all-star with the Detroit Lions. And now the first game...
They call them Pro Bowlers. Yeah. that term means almost nothing at this point.
His first game with the Minnesota Vikings with 4 days learning the playbook. He basically went out there and ran.
He had like 8 or 9 catches. Yeah, it was very impressive.
Just like he's been there for years. And so with that acquisition of the young superstar tight end T.J. Hawkinson, I think we're seeing this steeper decline for Thielen rather than that situation helping him out. Because in some cases, if you have someone like Hawkinson that can come in and take some things away from those first down catches, take defenders away from someone like Thielen, who in some cases is the 2 or even 3 wide receiver on a play. I don't see that happening though. I see Thielen declining more and more. The touchdowns not picking up at all, and him just ending up being the slot receiver who occasionally gets passes when they don't already go to Jefferson or Hawkinson.
Well, Thielen was the guy who would get peppered with passes, who would go over the middle, and now they've got Hawkinson, who's better at that. He's bigger, he's younger.
I hesitate to say better because Thielen was awesome.
Thielen was awesome. Well, okay, maybe not better as a whole, but like right now he's better.
Yep.
I mean, Thielen, on his first game on the team, 9 targets, 9 catches.
It's just going to continue. And so I like the Vikings are being talked about as a team to go far in the playoffs, and I completely agree with that, as I think that they are very clearly the best team in the NFC North without any kind of doubt.
Sure.
And not only that, but with the superstars that they have on their team in Hawkinson, in Justin Jefferson, in Dalvin Cook. I mean, you have a guy like Adam Thielen who is not even in the top 3 players on that team, but could still go to another team and be, the number 2 guy. Mm-hmm. It's fantastic. So I don't know if the Vikings can actually make it happen since Kirk Cousins has problems doing well in games that are televised on national TV. Did you know that?
I did, but I thought it was primetime games.
Prime time.
Okay, well, they're playing at noon.
No, I don't mean for this week. I just mean
just
like
in general.
going further in the playoffs, like less and less teams are playing. There's more and more pressure on Kirk Cousins.
Every playoff game is by itself.
Because someone might see him throw a pass.
Someone might see him. You wouldn't want anyone to see him.
But my point is, Jason, that those passes are going to go less and less to Adam Thielen. So just like you mentioned before with Aaron Jones, it may be difficult to sell a guy like this, but if you can offload him or sell him or do anything besides cut him to get value back on your team, that's what I would suggest.
Okay. Can we look at your quarterback rankings for Week 9 for a moment?
I mean, that's not my plan tonight, but sure.
Okay, so guys who you ranked in the top 10 who finished in the top 10. Josh Allen, I don't think Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray. Justin Herbert did not. Geno Smith, Joe Burrow, Tua did not, which doesn't make any sense to me because Tua's team scored so many damn points. Oh, he did. And Aaron Rodgers did not. So only 3 of the top 10 players that you had ranked in the top 10 finished outside the top 10.
So I did pretty
well.
well.
So I say, Fantasy Pros be damned. Listen to Dave about quarterbacks.
I love it. So I think that it's probably very dependent on like
they weren't in like the right order,
but it's probably like more about like the middle to end, which I admittedly don't put that much time into. I'm just
Don't admit that.
Well, look, it's based on stats and then on like positional variability and coaching decisions and matchups and everything else. We've Jason and I have been over this in years past, but I think that Fantasy Pros takes into account all of the things that happen and where those players are based on where they finished. So it's likely that, you know, maybe I had a guy that was ranked fairly high, like in the top 15, that finished like, you know, 30, and like I'd probably get a lot of points.
I think that sort of thing really, you know, dings you. But like if you think about it, like a lot of experts should get dinged for that same thing, unless you're going out on a limb on somebody and it burns you.
Well, apparently I'm doing something wrong, you know.
Maybe this was one of your better quarterback weeks. I don't know. I didn't keep digging.
I don't think it was.
You were 60.
Oh, no, that's not as bad as 135, which is my overall, which means most of my weeks are horrible. So, you know what I'll do? I'll reach out to Fantasy Pros and I'll ask them specifically. If
you were 178 the week before. I guess we could look at that, but we don't have that time.
Again, I don't want to go over this. One, because I don't want to make myself look bad. I'm actually doing well.
You are doing very well.
But if you're going to pay attention to my rankings, I would say the grain of salt goes with the quarterback. All right,
that's fair. I think that's a good place to end it.
I appreciate that you went back there and you said you did okay.
You did okay last week. You probably improved to 128 last week.
All right. We did it.
All right. Good show, Dave. We'll be back here next week, and I don't know what we're going to talk about. Probably fantasy football. But thanks for watching or listening, and subscribe at whatever place it is that you found us. And you can join us live on the show and ask us questions. We love to answer them while we're on the air.
Well, thank you, Jason, and that's drinkfive.com signing out for the night. We appreciate you.
Cheers,
all.
everyone.